So once again, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining me today on the webinar, Tap into the Power of Your Subconscious Mind and Overcome Stress and Anxiety. Before we get into the main topic, I'd just like to just brief you on how we are going to take this 1 hour forward. So the chat box is available to you. It is better if you can keep yourself on mute because sometimes the background noise can create a bit of an issue. But you can at any time communicate with me through the chat. I in fact prefer it if it is more interactive, because I will take you through what I have in mind, but many times you may have additional questions. Please do not wait till the end. You can wait till the end if you like. I will leave some time for question and answer, but I'm absolutely okay if you drop in any question at any time. I will check the chat box periodically and I will keep answering the questions as I go forward. For the ones who are watching me on Facebook, unfortunately, I will not be able to look into the comments on Facebook, but please put in your comments. And once the webinar is over, I will log into Facebook and I will try and answer your questions there as well. So welcome. I'm just going to check the chat box just to confirm there's no issue with the audio or, yeah, I don't think there's an issue. I think just check the device at Illuminations. Maybe that's the reason, but I don't get any. There's one participant who's already confirmed that she can hear me. I am hoping the rest can as well. So welcome everyone on the topic of the power of the subconscious mind and how we can use and understand our mind and use that as a tool to overcome stress and anxiety. Thank you, Mabeti, and thank you, Jasdeep, for confirming that you can hear me. So we are all good to go. So for some of you who have worked with me, you know me. For the ones who haven't, my name is Arpita. I'm an integrated clinical hypnotherapist and I practice at Illuminations JLT in Dubai. Apart from clinical hypnotherapy, I do practice other modalities like family constellation, transpersonal regression therapy, and I love doing training, corporate training as well. I'm also a teacher and a trainer of integrated clinical hypnotherapy with ECA. And I'm based in Dubai in the UAE. I've been here for more than 12 years now, based with my family here. And I find it very interesting and I find it very intriguing to bring to you a topic that is common to all of us at some point in life or not. We have experienced stress, we have experienced anxiety. It is very much present with us, and today I will look and I will bring to you my inputs on how we're going to combat that using and understanding first the power of the mind, and secondly looking at it as a if we talk of using a modality, how we can use one of the mind science modalities, which is hypnotherapy, that can give you some respite, some relief, and you take home certain tips and tools that you can practice on your own to combat stress and anxiety. Going straight into the topic, this is what I have in mind today. So I'm going to start with talking about stress and anxiety. What does it mean? Are these two words the same? Does it mean different things to different people? And also understanding both stress and anxiety from the perspective of first the body. So we will get into mind, but we'll also get into the connection that the body, the mind, and our energy levels have. And then we go into understanding how are we going to manage stress and anxiety, because at any point in time there will be certain amount of stress and anxiety, and stress in particular is not necessarily a bad thing. A little bit of stress in life actually helps us kick up our productivity and our deliverables. So how do we know when it is healthy stress, and how do we know that no, this is not healthy and this is now getting into the domain of anxiety? With that, I'll come and introduce to you the science of the mind. This topic is very, very close to my heart, because this forms the basis of a lot of modalities, whether we call it metaphor therapy or regression therapy or hypnotherapy. We are here talking about the mind, the conscious part of the mind, the unconscious part of the mind, how they interact. And today we're going to look at that from the angle of stress and anxiety. And then I will very briefly introduce to you the modality of hypnotherapy and how this modality can be used to manage our day-to-day stress and anxiety. I plan to leave some time at the end for question and answers. You can unmute yourself then and we can have a discussion. But as I mentioned, for anyone who joined in late, I'm very happy to answer your questions. The chat box is available at any point of time, going through any of these topics. If there's an immediate question you would want to ask, please feel free to put the question in the chat box. And I say so because it's way more fun and it's much more, the takeaways are much more when we have more of an interactive session rather than me on one side talking about the topic. So feel free to be as interactive as you like this evening. So coming to these two words, and I'm pretty sure we all use these words interchangeably. We say I'm stressed or I'm feeling anxious, but in reality, these are actually two different words, which may mean two different things altogether. So I will not get into the entire spectrum of anxiety or anxiety disorders, because that's a specialized subject, maybe some other time. For today, I'm going to just touch upon the understanding of stress and the understanding of anxiety and how they are not exactly the same. So it may be helpful if you have a pen and paper with you. As we progress, you can start to put your own thoughts in terms of what are the things that you feel stressed about, vis-a-vis what are the things that you feel constantly anxious about. And you will realize that it may not be the same. For example, if you have an extremely heavy day at work, you could be stressed, but you may not be anxious. But similarly, you could have a trigger in the environment, something happens, and you could be anxious but not stressed. They are not exactly the same. So, how do we talk about stress? Stress, as you see on the slide, can come from any situation, any thought that makes you maybe feel a bit frustrated. It can make you feel angry, nervous, worried, and maybe a little bit anxious as well. That's the feeling that we mostly get. So the beginning of this discomfort mostly starts with stress. In the first place, it is not always anxiety. Anxiety, on the other hand, is a feeling of a constant apprehension of some fear. Now, the difference is that for anxiety, for stress, mostly you will know what is stressing you. So work is stressing, homeschooling is stressing, COVID is stressing. So it's easy to identify where it's coming from. But as you see, for anxiety, it may not be the case. You may not know the source of uneasiness. So many times it happens when you're trying to go to bed, there's nothing stressful around you. Your room is perfect, there's dim lights, and you're ready. Your body is also very, very tired, and you know, okay, this is the time I hit bed. And as you hit your bed, you realize that your heart is beating a little faster, there's some kind of uneasiness, and you're not able to fall asleep. And you don't know the source of that uneasiness, which in itself can add to distress that you feel. That is anxiety. It's kind of similar but a little different from stress. The difference, as you see, is that stress is a response to a situation. There's suddenly something that has come up at work, the targets have gone up, or there's discussion about redundancies. You know where exactly. So there is a situation that has come up, and I am responding to that. that to that situation, to that threat, is what we are saying as stress. Now, anxiety, on the other hand, is reaction to that stress. Many times that is conscious, many times it is absolutely unconscious. As a practicing therapist, there are many times I work with people who would say, there's everything perfect in my life, there's nothing that is going wrong, yet there is this sense of anxiousness, palpitations, feeling awkward, sweaty palms, all of this, and I don't know where it comes from. That in itself is what we are today talking about as anxiety. Any comments, anything that, not only questions, if there's anything you'd like to share, please feel free to do that. Now, research shows that these are the top top 7 reasons why we get stressed. And remember, from stress, it can, if not addressed properly, this could lead into anxiety. The top reasons: job pressure, that could be, a tension with co-workers, bosses, if there's the quantity of work is too high; money, loss of job, reduced retirement, medical expenses, where either you're not able to earn money or your spending has suddenly gone up; health, like especially at the moment with the pandemic situation that we are in, of course it is extremely stressful to many of us in terms of how we are doing physically. Relationships, yes, it could be loss of a relationship in forms of a broken relationship, a divorce, death of a partner, or it could just come from arguments, or just the fact that there are no such credible relationships in someone's life. Stress also can come from what we eat, poor nutrition. So if it could be inadequate in terms of the nutrients that we need. It could be overdose of something. For example, too much of coffee, too much of tea, too much of processed foods, too much of sugar. They also impact how our mind and body reacts to stress. And very common, media overload. Gone are the days only of television, of radio. Now we are kind of captive to our gadgets. And this is something that I've seen even with very young population. So with children, with young adults, because there is this huge impact of media that we are facing. Again, it's not going against the development of technology, but the point to be noted here is the factor which leads to an overload or an addiction to it. And last but not the least is sleep deprivation. It may sound crazy, but it is true. People who sleep well, in terms of the length of their sleep as well as the quality of their sleep, are way more functional, way more effective, productive than people, and they deal with stress better, they deal with anxiety better than people who have any sense of some sleep deprivation. So if you have pen and paper, it may be one of these things that cause you stress. If so, make a note of it. If not, it could be something else as well. So in any case, make a note of what you think could be a probable source of a stress that finally could manifest into some kind of anxiety, and could trigger anxiety in you. So before we get into the mind part of it, which is the focus today, we are going to talk about how the conscious and the subconscious mind, they interact and how they affect stress and anxiety. I'm going to take a little bit time to explain to you so that you resonate more with what exactly is happening when we talk of stress in our bodies. Because today we are looking at this topic just not from the body, just not from the mind, or just not from our energy perspective. We are looking at it from a very holistic side. Holistic means the 3 elements of mind, body, energy together. So what happens in the body? Because it's very easy to understand this and it's very easy to feel. Each one of us, I'm pretty sure at some time or the other, have felt this. So generally, when things are normal, right now, for example, you are glued onto the webinar, I'm talking. For each one of us, we are in a state of what we call as homeostasis or normalcy. What does that mean? It means that our heart rates are normal, our breathing is normal, environment is calm, which means it's normal, natural curve. As you see, it's a flat line. Now imagine a crisis situation comes in. What could be a crisis situation? Say, for example, there's an earthquake. Imagine what's going to happen if at the moment we are sitting in the webinar and there's going to be an earthquake. Of course, we will disconnect immediately from whatever we are doing and we have to get out of our houses or our offices and go out in the open to a space which is clear, probably an assembly point. And maybe after a while, the tremor will subside and we will get an indication from authorities or from volunteers to go back. So when the crisis hits, so going with my example of the earthquake, what happens in our body? Our autonomic nervous system kicks in. The autonomic nervous system actually has two parts. The first part is the sympathetic nervous system, which means brain gives a trigger to the body saying, alert, it is a crisis situation. So what does the body do? Immediately you will notice in any crisis situation that you've been, your heart will beat faster, your palms will be sweaty, your adrenaline rush will come in, there will be more glucose that will be pushed into the blood, and the blood actually flows more to our extremities, which is our hands and legs, almost as if we are ready, as you see in the slide, for a fight or a flight situation, because this is survival and body is reacting to survival. And then what happens? Then when the tremor is over and we know that, okay, now the crisis is over, we can relax, which means now the brain gives a trigger to our body saying, relax. What does that mean? The parasympathetic nervous system kicks in and we start to come back to homeostasis or normalcy. Heartbeat goes back to normal, breathing becomes deep and rhythmic, and so on and so forth. This is how naturally we should be reacting to any stress that comes our way. But many times life is not that simple, and it's not that we have just one perceived crisis that is hitting us. We are most of the time juggling multiple crises, big and small, but we are. As a result, what happens is our body and our mind together is not able to understand the flashpoint. The flashpoint is when the crisis is over and it's okay for me to relax. And when we are not able to understand or get a click that, yeah, now it is over and now I can allow myself to relax, is when we cross that flashpoint, and that's what we generally call as a panic attack. That's what we generally call as, the ongoing sense of anxiety or the ongoing sense of stress. And each one of us, I'm pretty sure if you remember from your own lives, you will find when you've been in an accident, when there's been a natural disaster, when you've heard a news that is disturbing, you would have seen how your body reacts. So this is how we look at the stress and the anxiety from a body perspective. I'm just going to quickly look at the chat box. Zeenat says releases cortisol. Absolutely correct. This is exactly what happens when the sympathetic nervous system kicks in. So there is those stress hormones, the cortisols, the adrenaline being pumped into our bodies. Why? Because body is already in a fight flight mode. So I have to now do something to overcome that crisis. If body and mind is able to recognize when the threat is over, we do not continue with stress, we do not get into anxiety. When we fail to do that is when we are in that cycle of feeling constantly stressed or picking up anxiousness, not even sometimes knowing where it comes from. So with that understanding, the question is then, why do I feel this way? Because cognitively, I can understand when the crisis is over. I'm intelligent enough, but Why do I probably keep thinking what is the worst that can happen, or I replay that situation in my mind? And most importantly, knowing this as a background, how can I change? What can I do in order to change? Now, the focus today is to bring in that transformation in you and me through awareness. So, when there is a trigger that tells me it's a crisis, I will need to look at before this reaches my body. When we talk of triggers, when we talk of something that is external to us and is kind of pushing us or triggering us, or turning on that meter of anxiousness or stress, in holistic sciences we believe that my outer world is only a reflection of my inner self, because the same trigger may cause huge anxiety in me, but it may cause zero anxiety or stress in someone else. Why does this happen? Which means there is something inside me that kind of connects, that kind of hooks to that trigger, and then there's an explosion in me. So, in other words, we have no honestly control of anything that is outside us. And as you see, for example, the situation with COVID is a very relevant one. We never invited it, none of us wanted, but we are today facing a global crisis. Now, do I have the power, the resources to make it go away or never come in the first place? No. The only power, the only resource that I have is my response to the situation. So you will see around you as well people that are that have adapted and they're trying their best to move on with COVID, taking precautions, maintaining some kind of peace and serenity. And we have also seen people who've had really, the situation has made them extremely anxious, paranoid, painful situation. So today we are going to look at that inner self. And as I mentioned, the approach is just not looking at it from one angle of the mind, one angle of body, or one angle of energy. What my aim today is to look at it from three aspects, but then we will move more into the mind side of it. Why do we call this holistic? It's because this is a accumulation, a mix of three elements. The word holistic has Greek origin, and the word in Greek language means to be whole. And human beings are whole. We are just not our bodies, right? We are just not what we think in our minds, and we are just not how we feel energetically at a given point of time. We are actually a mix of these three inner resources. Now, today we have already discussed about how the body has reacted, or how the body reacts to a crisis, but our focus today is more on the mind. So we will now go into more details of understanding how the conscious, the subconscious, and the critical mind actually affects our sense of stress or anxiety. We Each of us have heard about this, the power of thoughts and the power of minds, and we often say that it is our thoughts that actually determine how we feel. The same situation can generate some thoughts that can affect us negatively for some of us, and the same situation can also be very calm and composed for somebody else, which means that if we are able to tap into how we habitually think, we can impact how we habitually feel. For example, many times you'll hear of people who say, my mind doesn't stop racing. I am constantly having thoughts, which means if there are 1001 thoughts, like overthinking happening in my mind, of course it will affect how I feel. So today, if we are talking of how we are going to feel, how we are not going to feel anxiety, and how we should avoid feeling stress, then we must go a step behind and look at how we are going to change the way we think. So the thoughts are so vital in shaping our experience, which means that my thoughts, in a very simple way, I'm going to get into the details of it, impacts my beliefs, and my experiences of positive and negative, and then this information is somehow stored in the mind. So this whole idea then gets us into the understanding of mind science. As I mentioned, it is one of my most favorite topics, and I do believe this is a topic that should be available to everyone. This is something that probably should be even taught in schools as a science, because with this knowledge, it becomes way more easier to balance thoughts, balance our emotions, and in fact, if understood in the right way, then this also impacts our physical health, our immunity, and how we feel, our energy levels. So, mind science, which brings us to the very simple, basic question of what is mind. And I will leave it open to you. Maybe a few of you, if you feel like, could just in the chat box share your thoughts on what you think is mind and where is your mind. It will be interesting to note and see how differently we feel about this very simple word, which we probably use every day. So just give it a thought, and top of your head, whatever comes to again to your mind, you can share and tell me, what do you mean by mind? What does mind mean to you, and where is your mind? Okay. Thank you, Jasdeep, for sharing. The brain is the physical gray matter, and the mind is the process of thinking and feeling. Yes, I would agree. I would agree that the mind and the brain, thank you for bringing this up, is not the same thing. Mind is not equal to brain, and brain is not equal to mind. Brain is the physical part. It's almost like a nice way of saying this is, for example, I'm connecting to you today for this webinar. I'm connecting through the hardware of my computer, my laptop that is in front of me. So every time I have to move a slide, I am actually touching the hardware. The brain, as Jasdeep says, is very truly is this physical. The important part to note here is the word physical or tangible. So just like my laptop has hardware, in our bodies we have the brain. But just having the laptop in front of me fully operational does not allow me to connect to you. I am connecting to you through many softwares. Zoom, for example, I'm using PowerPoint. Software is what we call as the mind. So the software works on the hardware and then it is whole. So the software is the intangible part, or the mind is what we call as the intangible part, and the brain is the hardware through which, the tangible part through which the mind affects the body. So as you see here, when we talk of the mind, we are here talking of a tool. Mind is nothing but, it's a very powerful force. It's a tool that can either empower us. So if I am in charge and if I understand the functioning of my mind, it can make me more empowered, or if it can enslave me. This is the example I was talking. If there are so many thoughts that are running, like almost like the picture of a hamster in a wheel, it means we are enslaved by those repetitive thoughts. To the contrary, it could be that I know through meditation or through other holistic practices, I'm able to still my mind, and that in itself is very empowering. So in holistic sciences, it's very beautifully described or defined. So mind in holistic sciences is defined as a vibrating ball of energy all around us, the center of which is at the pit of your stomach. It is kind of offbeat, sounds a little weird probably as well, but it's extremely interesting. So just imagine that our bodies are soaked in this field, which we are calling mind. The center of this field is at the pit of our stomachs. Now, can anyone guess what organ do we have at the pit of our stomach? Going by human anatomy and physiology, what would you find at the pit of our stomach? Any guesses? Yes. Yes, Zenith. It is the gut, or as we call it, the intestines. The funny part is the intestine is actually and technically part of our gastrointestinal system, which means the function of our intestine is only to digest the food we eat. Yet we say, and we almost all of us have used this term gut feeling. Our gut doesn't feel. What this means is there is an innate intelligence, what we call as the mind. The epicenter of this intelligence rests in the exact position where our gut or our small intestine is. It is with that intelligence we make some assumptions, and sometimes they come true when we say, oh, I have a gut feeling it's going to rain tomorrow morning, or I have a gut feeling that this deal will not go through. That, you can call it intelligence, you can call it intuition, you can call it your own sense of how you are operating in this world. This is how mind is defined. So mind, being that software, operates through the brain, definitely, because brain is the seat where, you know, where the chemicals, our hormones, everything is controlled. It operates through the gut, which is another seat of this interface. In many schools of thought, people also believe that there is also another seat, which is the heart. Many a times we say that, you know, my heart wants something, but my head wants something else. Head doesn't want anything, heart neither. Heart is part of the circulatory system. But when we say, we mean that there is an innate intelligence around us with which we are experiencing life, and that ball, that vibrating ball of energy, is what we are defining as the mind. Again, brain is the hardware, including in the gut and the heart. So the physical body through which the software is operating is the hardware, and the mind is the software. Now, then, with that definition, now let us look at what is the mind composed of, and how do we, knowing this will help us understand our stress points and our anxiety, anxiousness or anxiety issues. As we all know, the mind has broadly two parts. The first part of the mind is what we call as the conscious mind, and the second half of the mind is what we call as the subconscious mind. Now, as you see in this slide, the conscious mind is actually really small in terms of, you know, the capacity. It's only 10 to 12%, and that's a big estimate. Some schools of thought believe it is less than 5%, which means there's a bigger part of our mind, what we call as the subconscious mind, which is roughly around 90%. Now, what does this conscious mind do? As you see here, the conscious mind is all about our thoughts. It's thinking, it's the logic, it's analyzing, it's feeling, it's judging, it's decision making, etc. So all these cognitive functions that I have listed here is what the conscious mind does. So for example, we sitting in this webinar today, we are using, all of us are using our conscious mind to do all of this. I have a question which I will check. I'm not sure if it's appropriate to ask what's exactly the difference between the subconscious and unconscious. Of course, it is appropriate to ask. I'm coming to that. So that's the conscious part. We are using this mind to live our entire life. If you think of it, these are the functions which we are using every single day to live our lives. So we are actually only using approximately 10% of our mind's capacity to live our entire lives. Now imagine how things would change if we had an access to the subconscious. Another way of looking at it is, think of an iceberg. When you look at an iceberg, only a little part, 1/10 of an iceberg, is actually on the surface of the ocean. The rest is submerged. So it is exactly the same with the subconscious mind, which means we cannot access or we cannot dive into that subconscious part or access that subconscious part all the time. Subconscious mind, unconscious mind, Zenith, for your question, it is one and the same that we are talking of. Mostly in psychology and psychoanalysis, we call it the unconscious. In hypnotherapy, in mind sciences, we call it the subconscious. So it's not a huge difference. We loosely use both the terms referring to the part of our mind which we cannot access randomly. Then, but he has mute yourself. Thank you so much. If I could request all of you to be on mute till we go into question and answer, please. Thank you. Okay. Coming back to subconscious. So you see that we are actually living our entire life using only conscious mind. Then why do we have such a big space for subconscious when everything is being done by the conscious? And it brings us to the question, then what does subconscious mind do? And the answer is actually very simple. Subconscious mind doesn't do those 10, 20, 40, 100 things. Subconscious mind has two functions, and two very important but very simple functions. First and foremost, it keeps you alive, survival. How? So for example, if I tell you each one of you can raise your right hand and wave at me, all of us can do it. I know this is my right hand and I can wave. How do I do this? Because I'm using my conscious mind, I'm exercising control on my hand and I'm doing it. Which means that if we have so good control on our bodies, then at the same time, I should be able to control the rate at which my liver is functioning, or the rate at which my cortisols are being secreted in my body, or the adrenaline rush is coming. But the answer to that is no, I cannot. Which means there is a bigger part of the mind, not the conscious mind, but the subconscious mind, that is in charge of our internal body functions, our survival. Again, in a different example, when we go to sleep at night, the conscious mind goes to sleep as well. And we don't give a reminder to our conscious mind saying that throughout the night, the heart needs to keep beating and I need to keep breathing and my kidneys need to function. But the fact is, it does function. So subconscious mind is the custodian of our internal body functions and hence the custodian of our survival. I will come back to this with respect to our panic attacks, our anxiety, anxiousness, because this comes from the zone of the unconscious or the subconscious. The second thing that it does is it stores. So imagine your conscious mind to be the CPU of your computer, the central processing unit, which means it's constantly processing the data that is coming in. And the subconscious mind is like your hard drive. And what does a hard drive do? It does nothing but stores. So in our subconscious mind, we have every experience of our life stored. So imagine this is like a huge room. It's like an archive room where every moment of our lives is filed, archived, and kept in a very neat fashion. Interesting to note is if the strength of the conscious mind is 1 times x, the strength of the subconscious or the unconscious mind is 6,000 times x. And this brings us to the understanding that many a times we say, I am not going to be stressed today, or I will not let myself be anxious about something. And we say that with full belief coming from the conscious part of our mind, but suddenly something happens around us And that sense of anxiety, that sense of doom, that sense of stress, as if emerges like a volcano from within us, and it goes beyond our control. And that is because it may be coming from a space that is 6,000 times way more stronger than our conscious desires. So when we talk of mind sciences, as a practicing therapist, it's not, people will only come for this when they have logically tried to do everything, but it doesn't give a solution. So logically, I know that I should not get anxious every time I see a dog, because consciously I know that I was bitten by a dog when I was 3 years old, and that doesn't mean that every time I see a dog I need to get anxious, but it happens every time. Why does that happen? Is because imagine one of those files of that memory of that incident at when I was 3 years old is there in my hard drive. And every time I see a dog approaching me or coming my way, the trigger is coming from a space which is 6,000 times stronger than my conscious mind, which says there's nothing to fear. Not every dog is going to come and bite me, and it's not going to repeat itself. That's an example of how, when we feel anxious, we feel stressed, we also feel that we have no control over it. This is exactly how I feel, and it continues. Now, in this subconscious, in this zone which is unknown to us, there are again two parts. This sense of anxiety or this trigger could come from what we call as the modern memory, which means my own life memory. From the time that I've been in my mother's womb till this very moment, imagine all the moments, all the experiences of my life is stored. So this is my memory, my experiences. However, it is very interesting to know that anxiety does not necessarily only come from my experiences. It could come from what we call as primitive memory. So primitive memory is what we are saying, in other words, evolutionary memory. It could be ancestral memory, it is the DNA, it is the genetics. So it may be coming from my line of family. It may be coming from somewhere, which the only difference is modern memory belongs to me, and primitive memory is something that I have taken in on me that doesn't belong to me. It's very interesting when we say that, uh, or there are diseases that are that can run in the family, for example heart diseases or diabetes, and it's very easy and it's very acceptable for us to say, oh, my father has diabetes, so there's a chance that I will have diabetes. Fair, DNA, genetics. However, there is also a possibility that my great grandmother had anxiety, and there's an equal possibility that I may have anxiety, but we don't relate it most of the times in that respect, but it does happen. So the source of this overwhelming stress and anxiety could come from you, or it may come hidden in your DNA. It could come hidden in whatever you believe is primitive memory of people who have lived before you, your line in the family, equally. And as a practicing therapist, I see both cases very, very, very often. Can fear be inherited? I'm looking at the chat box. Yes, Zenith, it can be inherited. Like any other mental, physical disorder that can come through the family, it can definitely be inherited all the time. All the time. We see it running in the family. Sometimes, it's very interesting. We are digressing a bit, but fear and anxiety is very related. So I'll take a moment to answer your question. Um, there's this whole line of work. When you get more into understanding primitive memory, we are talking of ancestral healings, and it is so surprising that sometimes you wouldn't even know that ancestor, because how many generations do we actually know? We know parents, we know grandparents, maybe great grandparents, but beyond that, maybe names, but we maybe pictures, but we really don't connect. But yes, it could come down through many generations. Not only fear, it could be fear, it could be anxiety, it could be depression, it could be anything that we are struggling with today. Okay, moving on, that leads us to understanding of anxiety or stress. Now, what happens is, remember how we said the body reacts to the crisis. When we say crisis, when there is something in our environment, what we can call as a trigger as well, it may come from something in my environment that triggers one of these files that you see here, which is present in my primitive memory, or it could come from my modern memory. But the fact that happens is we come to the point of triggering in ourselves what we call as two very basic survival instincts, either fight or flight. And this is the reaction that then the body picks up. Our autonomic nervous system kicks in, and the slide which we refer to as the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. So this is how, from the mind, from the environment, say there's something in the environment that triggers a file in my unconscious zone, in my subconscious zone, that in itself now triggers my body. And the result of that is what we say, I'm feeling extremely anxious, or my heart is palpitating, my palms are sweating. That is the connection. That is the connection between the mind and the physical manifestation of that anxiety in our bodies. I believe there are a few more questions. I'm quickly going to have a look at that. Zenith says, my father was bitten by a dog when he was a kid, and I am very scared of dogs. You see, exactly. Many times it happens. You may not. So this is a, thank you for sharing, Zenith. This is a very beautiful example of a primitive memory. So maybe you don't have a bad incident with a dog. Nothing has happened to you, but that fear gets transmitted through genetics, and it's very, very common. A lot of times, even mostly phobias. So there's a difference between fear and phobia. Fear is when you kind of know where it comes from. Like for example, dog bit me and I'm scared of dog is a fear. Phobias mostly come from primitive memory because you will not be able to find a reason. So sometimes people have fear of heights, like claustrophobia. Those kind of phobias mostly come from the unconscious primitive part of our minds. Okay, I'm just going to see if there's anything. Yeah. So moving on with this background, now understanding anxiety or stress from not only the conscious part, but also from the unconscious part. One of the modalities that we talk of in mind science that is extremely safe, it is extremely effective to work with anxiety is hypnotherapy. I'm just going to take you through a very brief introduction of that on how it works, relating it to the science of the mind. There are a lot of myths, there are a lot of doubts around this line of work because mostly we believe that this is something unnatural or we lose control. I'm going to touch upon it. It's not so. So the term hypnosis or hypnotherapy again comes from a Greek word hypnos, which if you translate into normal English language, it means nervous sleep. Now, as you see, this is a paradox. You can't be nervous and you can't be sleeping at the same time, which means this is a state of mind in which our physical bodies are so relaxed that as if it is sleeping. However, our mind is nervous. Now, nervous doesn't mean anxious nervous. Nervous here means active, agile. Hypnosis is a state with which you and I experience every single day. It is not unnatural. It is not created clinically. So, for example, when you are going to bed at night, the moments between which you are totally awake and you're falling asleep is the state of hypnotic trance. Similarly, when you get up in the morning, your alarm rings, you put your alarm off and you're trying to get out of bed. That time when you're not fully awake and fully asleep again is hypnotic trance. So this is something which is very natural to us. If you're watching Netflix for more than 5 minutes, you're in hypnotic trance. If you're watching television, you're in trance. So hypnotic trance is a very, very natural state. It is just an altered state of mind which we induce when we work on cases of anxiety or stress. The same state can be induced in a clinical setup, but it is nothing new. It is something that is very natural to each one of us. And this state is then used for reprogramming. How? Go back to your picture of the mind and imagine one of those files that are sitting in the subconscious space is creating the anxiety. In this line of work, the idea is not to take a deep dive. So, hypnosis is the deep dive from the state of the conscious mind. Under that hypnotic trance, we are able to dive into the subconscious space. How does this work? With permission from the conscious mind, and when you're working with a therapist, you are able to move from your conscious into your subconscious. Doesn't mean that your conscious is gone. So it doesn't mean that you fall asleep. It doesn't mean you go to la la land. You're very much present, but in a very relaxed state. Once you reach, so imagine you open the door and you're in the room full of archives, your subconscious mind. We go with that intent to find that one file or a cluster of files that is creating the concept of stress or anxiety. So, idea is not to erase or delete those files, because we do not delete experiences. If I was bitten by a dog, I was bitten by a dog, period. Now, what needs to be done is we take that file out and we, from the hard drive of your computer, we are just putting it on your desktop, which means I'm bringing it to my awareness that this is how it is causing this trigger. And what we do is we neutralize the file. So we rewire, we reprogram, we don't delete. How do we rewire? With that file, the file has two parts to it, right? There is one part which is a fact which says I was bitten by a dog, and it has second part which is an emotional charge that has gotten attached to it. And that is what we need to work on. We don't change the fact, we don't touch the fact, we work on the emotional charge, which means the next time when I see a dog approaching me, if that emotional charge has been neutralized, so it's no longer in negative, I will not experience in my body and my mind that anxiety. I will come back to the present moment and I'll deal with the situation from as the adult of today, not as my 3-year-old self who was bitten and who felt anxious. So the step by step, we first diagnose, we go and figure out what those files are, we neutralize it, and we kind of dissociate myself from my experience. So I may have had an experience that has caused anxiety in the past, but I am not equal to my experience. I am a person who has experienced it. And that detachment, the moment that detachment happens, we are able to release the toxicity that we are carrying, which means I'm able to release that negative charge. So every time something else happens in the environment, I do not fall victim, I do not fall prey to that sense of anxiety. Same thing, going from the mind getting into the body and experiencing it. So the goal, the end goal of this line of work, what we talk of as hypnotherapy, is to reprogram the thoughts, the beliefs, by healing out all our subconscious patterns, our files, which are in what I'm like loosely today talking about, and I'm saying it's corrupted, which means there is an error somewhere there. When we heal out our subconscious files and patterns, which are in conflict with my conscious desire, because my conscious desire is to be peaceful, but I can't be. This healing results in reprogramming of our thoughts. So our mind doesn't keep going back and repeating the same thoughts or repeating the same belief systems. And that's how we are talking about releasing and overcoming stress and anxiety. I'm going to take a pause here and I'm going to check if there are any new questions, because I'm mindful I have I've spoken a lot, I've given you a lot of information. So if there's any questions, feel free to, you can ask now. I'll just give it a moment. And if there are no questions, then I will open it up for question and answer. I believe there are questions. I'm just going to go into the chat. Okay. How long could this reprogramming take? Very good question. Thank you for raising it. How long could this reprogramming take, Betty? Sometimes it could just take a session. Sometimes it takes a little longer. There is no definitive rule of how long it can take because it's extremely personal. Sometimes the results will come like that, even because what happens is it's an aha moment for your conscious mind. Something that has been kept hidden, that has been under, comes to your awareness, and immediate results. You sometimes see results from the time of the session. If the problem persists in layers, for example, what do I mean by layer? That okay, there are incidences in my life that causes anxiety, and that is also tied to my primitive memory, which means it could even be ancestral. Then sometimes it takes more number of sessions. As a therapist, let me tell you, average between 1 and 5 is what we see in most cases. Most cases, it's less than 5. In fact, what I personally see in most cases. Again, it will be dependent on case to case basis. I'm not a fan of prescribing and saying it needs to be X number of sessions. It's it's very personal. Sometimes even a single session does magic to the person. Seenath, explain RTT. Can you tell me what is RTT? I didn't understand the abbreviation. I will wait for you to give me more information. And yeah, I was just coming back to talking about the modality as hypnotherapy. Extremely useful in terms of anxiety and stress, because that hypnotic trance in itself clears a lot of what do you call that information that has gathered throughout the day. So we use and that may also answer your question in terms of the reprogramming, is that many a times we use self hypnosis. So you could work with a therapist, but mostly with when there is anxiety or when there is stress, we use a tool called self hypnosis where you learn to use it for yourself, and that you can continue even beyond the session for 21 days to see results. So we do a mix. I would ideally do a mix of both and leave you with that experience of that trance in which you can manifest a life where you do not feel that anxious. Can this type of reprogramming be done virtually? Yes, of course, all the time. I work with people across the world, and especially now after COVID, when mobility has been very restricted for the almost the whole of this year. It works absolutely fine. It makes no difference whether you're doing it face to face or whether you are doing it online for hypnotherapy. Now, if I'm going to be using some other techniques which require body work, that requires physical presence at the center where I work. But no, for reprogramming, you could definitely do sessions online. It doesn't require physical presence. It can be done, it can be taught even online. Rapid transformational therapy, I am not too much aware of it, so I won't be able to link that to hypnosis. What I'm talking about is classical, clinical, and integrated hypnotherapy. RTT is not something that I use, or hence I would not comment on anything that may not give you the right answer. It may be another technique similar to hypnosis, but at the end of the day, when we say hypnosis or regression or metaphor, all these kind of, or even for example, rapid transformational therapy, we are talking about trance work. So the trance can be induced through hypnotic modalities. It could be induced through the body. It could be induced through talking. Trance necessarily again doesn't mean that you have to close your eyes. Sometimes trance can be induced with eyes open as well. So I would believe, I'm not sure, Zina, but I would believe it's similar. But I'll refrain from saying anything more because I may end up giving you wrong information. You're welcome. So yeah, if there's any questions, please feel free to share. You can unmute yourself as well. We are almost at the end, so you can unmute and ask your questions if you like. And if we don't have any more questions, then I would once again thank you all for joining me today. I hope you found it useful, and have a very good evening. I will be here for a few more minutes just in case anyone else has a question. If not, thank you all and have a wonderful evening. Thank you. Thank you so much. I will check the chat and I'll be around for a few more minutes in case there are any more questions. Thank you so much. You found it interesting. Is that Kaltoum? Yes. Thank you, Zenith. Good evening to you too. If I could just display my screen, of course I will. Just a moment. You can also contact Illuminations. I work exclusively at Illuminations, so you could contact them in order to reach me as well. I'm just going to...
Thank you very